Well, hey there, guys. I'm Axel the Beast, and this is the Curiosity Shop, ZeldaDungeon.net video mailbag where I answer your Zelda questions. And real quick before we get started, we now have this awesome new logo. Check it out. Made by Michael DiVitetto. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. You know, it won't go into a regular use until mailbag number 100, but there's also going to be an intro contest. You can check the link in the description for the full details. This one's a little harder to explain. I'll probably actually upload a video all about the contest, but you should check the thread out and read the description of the rules there. It's like an intro video for future mailbags starting with mailbag number 100, and you should just read about it and submit a video. That'd be awesome. Anyway, get on to the questions. R2D93 asks, which Zelda game do you think had the best bosses, and why? I really have to go with Skyward Sword on this. You know, I actually wrote an article complaining about the, I guess the genericness of the bosses of the previous Zelda games. You know, assuming genericness is a word. And like how, like, in Twilight Princess and the Wind Waker, pretty much every boss is a gigantic monster, and there's just no variety, and a lot of them are really easy, whereas in Skyward Sword, I thought that there was a lot of great design on the fights, there was a lot of challenging gameplay, and a lot of them differed from each other. Not always in size, a lot of them were still pretty huge, but some of them were very different in size, and there were even some humanoid ones, so I really think Skyward Sword is the best boss variety, and the bosses were just funner. It was like, the fights weren't just puzzles. There was certainly a puzzle element, but that's not all they were. There was a lot of fighting, too. It was just a lot of combat, and it was really fun. But be sure to tell me your guys' favorite game for the bosses in the comments. Vicky211 asks, what item or gameplay element from a past Zelda game would you like to make a return in a future game? I think for me the big thing is like non-linearity of the... is like complex overworld design and non-linearity in the overworld, so you can like actually really wander around and just check everything out and uncover a lot of secrets on the overworld itself and actually wander directly from place to place with full control over where you go, how you get there, and what you do along the way, unlike a lot of the recent games with the transportation stuff. I think Skyward Sword kind of started in that direction, but it really didn't go all the way at all. But I'm hoping that that's kind of what we'll see in future ones. But be sure to tell me the same thing for you guys, because that's a big topic that I'm sure there's a lot of different answers for. Time Sorcerer asks, do you think that with enough support from the Zelda community, Miyamoto might consider going back to an on-foot exploration type of game? I mean, I know you don't like Operation Moonfall, but could the operation's concept of using social media as a way of getting the community's collective voice onto the table be the way to getting that particular element across the developers? You know, maybe. I definitely know that if you really want to make a difference, want the developers to change something in the series, you really need to let them know and, you know, have a method of them finding out about that. So, yeah, definitely I think if you want something changed, you really got to vocalize it and really get it out there. So I guess you're right in that way. I don't think social media is the only way to do that. At least depending on what you mean by social media, I guess. I also think this is something that they haven't forgotten about, and like I said, I think Skyward Sword did start to move in this direction, so I'm kind of just hopeful they're going to figure that out on their own, because it really did have, the overworld on the surface, not in the sky stuff, really did start to go in that direction, so I feel like this is already where they're headed, whether we talk about it or not, or maybe because we were already talking about it, but yeah, I guess that could help. Sir Quaffler asks, what are your thoughts on Nintendo developing side games where they expand on certain events they allude to in the main game, such as the war against Demise before Skyward Sword, or the onslaught by Ganondorf that led up to the flooding of the Wind Waker? I really don't think they're going to cover these things, because they were really developed purely as a part of those games' story. They were designed to set up or explain elements of those games. I don't think they really intend to touch on it again. Nintendo has this thing of not really connecting things directly. There's a lot of questions between games, like, you really don't know at all. And I talk about this, that it's not really the history of Zelda, it's the legend of Zelda. It's not supposed to be defined exact events. It's supposed to be kind of a lot of blank space in between. And I don't think that's really going to change, or necessarily it even should, or at least not completely. I think they could expand on it some, but I never really expect to see games address those backstories. I don't think that's ever really going to happen, or at least not to the degree we'd want it to. The Legend of Zelda fanatic 030 asks, I heard from a fellow Legend of Zelda fan that Nintendo is making The Legend of Zelda more kid-friendly. I personally think that Skyward Sword was way too childish. What do you think? Do you think they should go back to Twilight Princess's style of that? Twilight Princess was kind of an anomaly in that way. A lot of Zelda games have childlike aspects, and really, I always consider the Zelda series family-friendly, not kiddie, because there's a difference. Kiddie means it's specifically targeted at kids, whereas family-friendly means it's okay for kids, but not necessarily specifically targeted at them. And that's how I always looked at the Zelda series, and that's how it's always been. And even Twilight Princess didn't deviate from that completely, whereas with Skyward Sword had a lot of serious plot points, and there was some really serious stuff going on with some very scary, frightening characters. So I really don't think that, I guess I don't agree at all, so no, sorry. Skullraid003 asks, one of the things that makes Zelda games amazing to me is their plot and story, and if the story is good enough and the ending is bittersweet, I often find myself tearing up at the end of Zelda games. Does this happen just to me, or do other Zelda fans experience this? Well, you're definitely not alone. I mean, reporters cried at the trailer of Twilight Princess, and that was just the trailer. The only Zelda game ending that made me tear up a little was the Fi ending. The Fi part of the ending of Skyward Sword. That definitely got me a bit, even though it wasn't exactly well developed. But I don't think the Zelda games always had the best plot development. In fact, rarely do. I think Skyward Sword was a step in the right direction, though, and maybe that's a reason why it got me. But yeah, they could develop it better. But you're definitely not the only one that has that reaction. Definitely not. Shadow Mori asks, do you think that the Zelda Wii U will have more spells and magic like in the Final Fantasy games? Well, I don't know about it being exactly like in Final Fantasy, but sadly, well, I do like the idea of magic returning to the series. It doesn't seem like that's necessarily going to be the case, because Aonuma's like implied that he thinks it's good without it. He likes the current direction. So I think for a while, at least, we're not going to see a lot of it, which sucks, because I do like the idea, but I guess interesting to see what they'll do without it. Link 5967 asks, I was wondering if the Triforce of Courage even existed in the first Zelda game, because in the TV show, the Triforce of Courage wasn't mentioned once. What do you think? Well, the TV show isn't a good indication of this, because it was just based on the games. It wasn't really, it doesn't define anything about the story. But in the original Legend of Zelda, the Triforce of Courage either hadn't been invented yet at all by the creators, or simply didn't appear in the story. And in the sequel, which is a direct continuation with the same Link, it's indicated that the King of Hyrule had hidden away the Triforce of Courage a long time ago. So it just wasn't around. Ganon and Link just didn't get it. That's all there is to it. Reebok Vapora I9 asks, what do you think about Stone Tower? Did the ancient tribe build it? Was it built to reach the heavens and make war with the golden goddesses? Why do you think it's there? My personal theory on Stone Tower, and I don't like the theories about it being like a Tower of Babel thing. I don't quite buy that. My personal theory is it's simply a shrine to Majora. It has Majora symbols throughout it, a lot, all over the place. And it's this really evil place that caused all the problems in Icona, which is some really creepy, supernatural, ghostly stuff, right? And all the Skull Kid did there was open the door. So I really think that it's kind of like it's built to be a demonic shrine to a demonic like entity, which is Majora. That's my personal impression on it. It's not really explained. It's supposed to be mysterious. So Zeppelin 6068 asks, if you think that the Great Deku Tree in the Wind Waker is the Sprout in Ocarina of Time, do you think it's possible that the Forest Haven in the Wind Waker is supposed to be the remains of the Ocarina of Time's Great Deku Tree? Well, you could say that. I mean, there's room. I've said this a lot recently, but there's room to make that theory, but there's nothing that implies it, really. I think that the idea of saying that the tree has to be a previous tree is kind of silly, because it's a forest area. They're going to put trees there. And they clearly wanted the island to look iconically like a giant tree from a distance. So I guess I don't see it why it has to be, but you could definitely say it could be. That's as far as I'm willing to go on it, though. Demise the Beast asks, in Skyward Sword, did you like the Imprisoned fights? If so, which ones? Because I liked them, but found the last one to be a bit frustrating. I actually found the last one to be incredibly easy, and I didn't understand why it was even put in the game, because it was so easy. No offense. But I actually thought the Imprisoned fights were fun. I mean, they were a little more repetitive, a lot more like classic Zelda fight, because they went into it like a very simple formula that you repeated like about 3 times in the fight. But I didn't mind that. In fact, I thought it was good to have that. Granted, a lot of other bosses in the game deviated from that formula. And I like the Imprisoned fights a lot throughout the game. I can kind of understand why they're annoying, but I really didn't find them that way at all. But I do actually have, I must admit, I found them a bit annoying when I had to do them over and over again, and right back to back in the lightning round. So I guess that's the only situation where they bother me. But in the game itself, I didn't mind them at all. Alright, last question. The Darkest Link asks, if Ganon is the King of Evil, what does that make Demise? The King of Evil. Alright guys, that's it for this time. Be sure to send your questions to the contact page in the description, and I'll see you guys later. Link is awesome asks, do you think Link is awesome? Meh. Aluna to the Past asks, how do the Kokiri reproduce? Garo asks, Garo Master. Cool.